Living in Spain is worse than you think. The dream of living in Spain has become impossible for locals. Rent jumped 11.5% in 2024 alone, pushing the national average to 13.5 euros per square meter by December. In Madrid, you'll pay between 1,000 and 1,600 euros monthly for a tiny one-bedroom in the city centre. Need more space for a family? That'll cost you 1,200 to 2,000 euros for a standard three-bedroom, if you can find one. Houses that ordinary Spaniards could afford 10 years ago now sit completely out of reach. Since 2010, property prices have climbed 44% across Spanish cities, while wages barely budged. Young people feel this pain the most. Only 17% of Spaniards under 30 have managed to leave the parents' home, down sharply from 26% before the 2008 crash. The average Spaniard now lives with mum and dad until they're almost 31, while most of their European neighbours move out by 26. As you can guess, this is a housing nightmare that's even reshaping Spanish society at its core. Since no one wants to start their family while still living with family, the birth rate has crashed to one of Europe's lowest as couples delay or abandon plans for children. Rural towns are dying, schools shuttered, shops closed, futures erased. More Spaniards die each year than are born, a population decline that started in 2010 and shows no sign of stopping. Something had to give. In April 2024, anger boiled over as hundreds of thousands marched across 40 Spanish cities. Their rage wasn't aimed at politicians, but at tourists and wealthy foreigners. Crowds in Barcelona blocked tour buses. Protesters in Mallorca carried signs reading, "Get Airbnb out," and Mallorca is not for sale. The message was clear. Locals wanted their homes back. But to be fair, it's not that simple. See, the bitter twist is that tourism creates 1 in 10 Spanish jobs and pours billions into the economy every year. But for many Spaniards, the prices become too high. Whole neighborhoods where families live for generations now house only tourists and wealthy expatriates. Some locals who grew up in these areas now clean vacation rentals in the very buildings their families once called home. Spain has reached a breaking point. But how did it come to this? To understand it, we need to go back to 2008. When the global financial crisis hit, Spain took it harder than most. Unlike countries with strong manufacturing or tech sectors, Spain had built its economy largely on tourism and construction. So, when international travel dried up and the building boom crashed, everything fell apart at once. Unemployment exploded, especially among young people. By 2011, things were so desperate that Spain had to accept a massive €78 billion bailout from the IMF and EU just to keep the lights on. Spain's government needed quick fixes. They chose two main strategies that seemed smart at the time: pump up tourism even more and attract wealthy foreigners to invest in Spanish real estate. In 2013, they rolled out the now infamous Golden Visa program. The deal was simple, but changed everything. Invest 500,000 euros in Spanish property and you'd get residency rights not just in Spain, but potentially across the entire EU. For wealthy people from Russia, China, the Middle East and elsewhere, this was an incredible opportunity. The program worked exactly as designed, maybe too well. Over the next 12 years, nearly 15,000 foreign investors poured money into Spanish property, spending over 7 billion euros. But here's the problem. Many never intended to actually live in Spain. They bought apartments and houses, renovated them to luxury standards, and then either left them empty most of the year or turned them into vacation rentals. Every property that went to a foreign investor was one less home available for local Spaniards. You could actually see this distortion in the sales data. After the Golden Visa program launched, there was a suspicious jump in property sales priced at exactly 500,000 euros, the minimum investment required. Sellers quickly figured out that they could price homes to attract these visa-seeking buyers who cared more about getting European residency than getting a good deal on Spanish property. This pushed prices up across the board, especially in places foreigners wanted most: coastal areas, islands, and city centers. At the same time, Spain doubled down on tourism. The sector grew rapidly, transforming entire neighborhoods into tourist zones. By 2024, with a population of just 47 million, Spain welcomed an astounding 94 million visitors annually, making it the second most visited country in the world. Tourism now accounts for nearly 20% of Spain's GDP, one of the highest rates in Europe and significantly higher than neighboring France, where tourism makes up around 13% of the economy. But this success came with hidden costs. As tourists flooded in, housing was increasingly converted to serve them rather than locals. Entire apartment buildings in historic neighborhoods transformed into Airbnbs and vacation rentals. By 2020, tourist accommodations had taken over 1.28% of Spain's entire housing stock. Sure, this might not sound too crazy, but zoom in a little and things get wild. In the Balearic Islands, about 5% of all housing was used for tourist rentals back in 2021, but in small towns like Búger and Pollença in Mallorca, you're looking at nearly 30% and 23% of homes turned into short-term holiday stays. Walk through Barcelona's Gothic Quarter or Mallorca's coastal towns today, and you'll find streets where most apartments sit empty, except during high season. And if you're young and trying to build a life in one of these cities, the math is downright brutal. Spain's monthly minimum wage is around 1,184 euros. The average rent for a one-bedroom place in cities like Madrid or Barcelona, over 1,100 euros. So, even if you're working full-time, you'd spend almost everything you earn just to keep a roof over your head. Forget about food, transportation, or even the occasional night out. And this problem isn't just limited to minimum wage earners. Housing researchers say you'd need to make at least 1,935 euros a month to keep your rent at or below 30% of your income, the threshold for financial stability. But the reality? The average young Spaniard brings in just 1,048 euros a month. That's barely half of what's needed for sustainable living. Wages have barely budged in over a decade, but rents keep climbing. It's like trying to run a race on a treadmill that's speeding up while you're standing still. What's worse is that all of this is happening to the most educated generation Spain has ever produced. Over half of young Spaniards have completed higher education, yet they face an unemployment rate of 25.5%. That's double the EU average. And those who do land a job, almost half of them are stuck with temporary contracts, which usually means low pay, no security, and no chance of planning long-term. So, there you have it, a massive generational wealth gap. Meanwhile, Spaniards over 75 own way more wealth than those under 35, mainly because they bought homes back when prices were actually affordable. The Spanish government has responded with various measures, but critics argue they've often made the situation worse. In 2022, rather than addressing the underlying housing crisis, Spain launched a new digital nomad scheme, allowing remote workers to live in Spain with tax benefits. To qualify, workers must earn at least 2,800 euros monthly, more than 4 times the country's minimum wage, effectively creating yet another influx of wealthy foreigners while doing nothing to help locals. But things are starting to change. After years of protests and growing frustration, the Spanish government is finally stepping up. In April 2025, they pulled the plug on the Golden Visa program, sending a strong message that housing isn't just something for wealthy investors to play with, it's a fundamental right. And Barcelona isn't stopping there. The city plans to ban all short-term tourist rentals by 2028. Airbnb and other platforms are fighting it, of course, but for once, it looks like the locals are gaining ground. At the same time, grassroots resistance is growing across the country. Tenant unions are emerging, helping people who once thought housing struggles were personal issues, realizing they're part of a broader, systematic problem. These unions are calling for concrete actions, caps on rent hikes, limits on foreign investment, restrictions on tourist accommodations, and a massive increase in public housing. And now, the movement has teeth. Last summer in Barcelona, protesters blocked tourist buses at the Sagrada Familia, armed with water pistols and chanting, "Tourists, go home." The Canary Islands saw massive demonstrations with 50,000 people flooding the streets. Union leaders there laid it out plainly, while a handful of property owners and investors get rich. Working people struggle with impossible rents, stagnant wages, and rising costs for everything else. And it didn't end there. In April this year, hundreds of thousands of people flooded the streets in over 40 cities across Spain. In Madrid alone, more than 150,000 protesters packed the streets, shaking their keys and chanting, "Get Airbnb out of our neighborhoods." And in June, even more protests are set to take place in 16 Spanish cities, with organizers promising they'll be the biggest and most powerful yet. Because these aren't just about housing, they're a warning sign of something much bigger. People aren't just fighting for affordable rent, they're fighting for their future. If these issues keep getting ignored, Spain could end up in a situation where the next generation has no real future. Young people might find themselves stuck living with their parents, or worse, leaving the country altogether in search of opportunities. Spain is at a crossroads right now. Once known for its affordable living and high quality of life, it's now facing tough questions. Will it prioritize the needs of its own people, or continue to cater to tourists and foreign investors? Will it be a place where young people can actually afford to build their lives and families, or one where entire generations are pushed out of stability? Right now, living in Spain is almost impossible for a lot of its citizens. A bitter irony considering the country is still sold as a Mediterranean paradise. Behind all those sunny beaches and historic cities, there's a growing sense of frustration. People are worried about the future and are determined to take back their right to affordable housing in the country that they call home. Want to dive deeper into the forces shaping our world? Check out this video YouTube thinks you'll love. Subscribe and turn on post notifications so you never miss out on any of our upcoming videos. It helps more than you know. Thank you for watching.